Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the February 2025 Charter Chat. Next slide. Before we get started this morning, just our normal reminder that the information you are going to receive today is only as a reference for your benefit. And before applying it to your specific situation, we strongly encourage you to review the laws and regulations and consult with your own legal counsel. Next slide. So today, actually, before I get into the agenda, I want to remind everyone to make sure they're on mute. And if you have questions, you are welcome to put them into the chat. We will try to answer questions as we go. If your question is not answered in the main session, you will have an opportunity to ask it in the breakout session. And just so you know, we are recording this session. The main room only will be recorded and the breakout rooms will not be recorded. So today's agenda, we'll do very brief introductions, go over some questions from the previous charter chat, give you some updates on legislation on the ACCS and the state board, as well as share some hot topics, including the Comprehensive School Safety Plan, Form 700, charter renewal, school closure procedures, and interim financial reports. Next slide. All right, so Santa Clara County, next slide. CCAP and the California Department of Education are all partnering to bring you CASI. Today we will have our charter leader from this Department of Education here to share some information with us. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide. And
okay.
Thank you.
Well, we have the department here, so they can certainly feel free to chime in. You can get it directly from them, but the question came up, hey, when are we going to see the next list of where the schools fall on the performance categories? And the word from the department is expect it on or before the end of the month. For those in charter schools, or if you're sharing this information with your authorized schools, they just have to make sure that their contact information is up to date on the directory, because that's how what the department will use to send the results to all the charter school administrators. And at any rate, for all of us, it's a good idea to be on the charter schools listserv from the department. So the link is there and will be in the resources as well. Anything you want to add from Susan or anybody from the department to that?
Thanks, Tom. Hopefully it will be before the 31st. And like Tom said, be sure to sign up so you get the fastest notification of when it goes live. And the other thing I would want to mention is that, as we know, the data on which this is based has been live since before Thanksgiving. So if you're in the process of a renewal, as we are here at CDE, we are using the latest dashboard data. So you don't have to wait for a performance category. And I know there are folks who work with their charter schools to look at that data together. But yeah, on or before March 31st, cross your fingers that it's closer to the earlier of March. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, next slide.
All right, so we're going to move into breakout rooms a little later. We will have breakout rooms 1 through 4. We ask that do we need to rename yourselves? Yes, rename yourselves, just adding your organization. And this will help our folks behind the scenes get you to the right rooms. We'll have 4 breakout rooms for authorizers and 1 breakout room for our non-authorizer partners. Next slide.
All right, so the legislature is back in session. They had until February 21st in which to introduce new bills, and there are actually a couple of spot bills or placeholder bills that will serve as vehicles for proposals that are still being developed. So AB 84 and SB 719 are examples that will address charter oversight. These spot bills must be amended with substantive language by the first committee hearing deadline, which is expected to be late March or early April. So you can take a look at this slide and at the next slide and see that there are currently about 6 that we're looking at. But I will say that when I ran Ledge Info, there were over 100 bills that did talk about charter schools. But most of it was simply just attaching charter schools to what was currently being done by district or clarification. Next slide, please.
Hey, Michelle,
Sure.
this came after our print deadline, and so can I also put AB 1062 on people's radars? I'm sure we'll have it on officially on a slide next month. Hoover, and it relates to charter schools whose unduplicated count is lower and capped at the district. And so there are charter schools that cannot get the extra supplemental concentration. So if folks want to take a peek at that, that just was introduced a couple days ago before these slides or after these slides were finalized.
Thank you, Susan. That one wasn't even on my radar. All right, so an update on the ACCS. They held their meeting on February 4th, and on the agenda, there was a renewal for an SBE authorized charter school, which is Altus Schools South Bay. The next ACCS meeting will be held on April 8th, and the state board meeting will be held on March 5th, and it'll be looking at Altus. Next slide, please, and I'll turn it over to Tom.
So it's that time of year again when we try to solicit your feedback from the field on kind of your authorizing context and your realities, but also where CASI can be of help. You may have filled it out in years past, but we still would love to get your responses every year, even if they haven't changed that much, because that really helps us sort of map out topics and ideas. The other thing is, if you have not filled this out before, boy, we especially want to hear from you. Then, for example, there's a list of, hey, here's where I need help, or here's topics where I could use help. And so please take a moment to do that sometime. We'll be sending it out by various means, by email and social media and everything else. But do take a moment to share with us your impact, because it really helps us design programming to best suit your needs. Thank you.
All right, so we're moving into our hot topics, where you will see relevant information on fiscal and program issues that are relevant at the moment. Next slide, please. Okay.
This is me. So 2 important documentation deadlines for charter schools that are coming up. For those of you collecting and reviewing the comprehensive site safety plans of the schools you authorized, those plans must be updated by March 1st. Per Ed Code 32282A2M1, this year, those safety plans must include procedures to respond to incidents involving an individual experiencing a sudden cardiac arrest or similar life-threatening medical emergency while on school grounds. Those procedures are encouraged to integrate evidence-based core elements, including cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR, training offered, and the placement of automated external defibrillators, or AEDs, on the school site, in accordance with nationally recognized emergency cardiac care guidelines. So if you have a checklist to review your site's CSSPs, just make sure you add that bullet about cardiac incidents. The second major deadline is that Form 700s must be completed annually by April 1st. So make sure you remind your schools, if you have some of those who are traditionally late on getting those in. And with that, I believe I'm turning it over to Susan.
Hi, thanks. So a hot topic that we've been asked about a lot is charter renewal. And so what's on here is not new information, but it's more of a reminder of practice, since a lot of us have not done a renewal in some years. So as you dust off the renewal file, you should have received a listserv message and a reissuance, because we got one of the paragraphs wrong. But if you go to our website, you should see this information that if you are a school district or county, you want to provide timely notification to CDE. It is the authorizer's responsibility. We will not accept a renewal notice from a charter school that's attempted to happen a few times. It'll trigger us to contact the authorizer, but ultimately the authorizer tells us if the school is opening, closing, or renewed. That is the responsibility of the authorizer, and you see 10 days. So I wouldn't say it's a hard 10 days and that, of course, the renewal is not rescinded, but I will say we've had a fact pattern here where an authorizer waited over a year to notify CDE. And during that time, the charter school's performance category changed. And so the authorized term was not valid. Now, if I had received the renewal notice from the authorizer in a timely manner, we would have honored it. But since it's been a lot more than 10 days and the performance category had changed, the authorizer, in my understanding, is going to go back and redo it with the eligible amount of years for that charter school's current performance categories. Or they're going to wait until on or before March 31st and see if their category shifts, and then they'll honor that category. We also got a question about authorizers who send this as a batch. So they do their renewals for the year, and then they send them at the end of the year. I would caution against that, in that if there is an issue, you want to be on record to have provided timely notification to the CDE. And if you're uncertain if it's been received or processed, or if your charter school, so a charter school should not be punished for an authorizer's failure to notify CDE. And the way that a charter school can have due process on that is we have two places that you can check your renewal term dates. One is a database that is very hard to use if you don't spell the school exactly right. Apostrophes and ambersands. The other one is a very easy to use spreadsheet where you can sort and change all the columns. So a charter school can check if their authorizer has done timely notice. And we have had charters say, hey, I was renewed. Why am I not updated? And in that case, we'll contact the authorizer. But please start to develop a process, a practice guide where there is that timely notification. And I don't know how to move it to the next slide. I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. Okay, so this is slide 2. And how you notify us is you use the charters plural, and you're going to download a hyperlink to the charter school renewal cover sheet. If you can't find it in Google, just search CDE renewal notification, and it should come up as one of the top search results. That's how I always find it, but it's called something to the effect of notification. I think we have a screenshot in a later slide, but you want to fill out the renewal cover sheet that is on the website. It's different than the one that was up even 30 days ago. So please use the newest one, and you are going to mark what performance category. It is going to be further revised because we got a practitioner question. Does it have to be the superintendent? For some of our larger districts, can it be a designee? Can it be the charter office staff, the charter office administrator or director? It can be. That's consistent with our past practice, but we will update the form and update the website. So it explicitly says superintendent or designee. So we appreciate the feedback we get on things of that nature. And then I'm going to scroll through questions. No, I specifically said the charter school is not penalized for the error of the authorizer. That's why you can contact us and make sure that your authorization date is correct. I don't know where to start on the question. Okay. Was encouraged, safety plans. Is that 10 days from the board meeting or 10 days from an MOU? MOUs are not part of our process in terms of education code. That's a local practice, so I have no relationship to the MOU. It would be 10 days from the board action. I want to recognize you're not going to have board minutes 10 days. So you will either have a board certification letter identifying board action, because you do need supporting documentation, or you might send the renewal form with a note that the board minutes are going to be processed, in which case we will wait until we get the board identification. So we are following what we see in Ed Code and regulation. Essentially the new Ed Code, that's not the renewal. Yes, it does, Douglas. It does seem to be a two-part notification. None of you will have minutes within 10 days. I do see that. We want to honor that the the Ed Code requires authorizer notification. It uses the word timely, and in other regulations, that's interpreted to be 10 days. Again, I don't have any relationship to your MOU. That's not a board action. That's not a renewal action. That's a local decision. Our
Susan,
draft board minutes, okay. I think you're much better off sending a board action letter on a district or county letterhead signed by a superintendent or a board office staff member rather than draft board minutes, because draft minutes are just draft. And you're welcome for the clarification. I
so
think there
Susan,
might, yes. Hi, Mifla.
with the MOU, in some instances, it's a conditional approval conditioned upon the charter school entering into an MOU. And so there may be a date down the road, like, I don't know, March, that the MOU has to be signed. And if they
Yeah.
don't sign it, then they're denied. So that does play into notifying CDE.
That's a fair question. I appreciate that. And we've had that fact pattern. And in that situation, we worked with the charter school and authorizer to understand that there was a later date. And so in that instance, the authorizer can tell CDE, we had board action, however, it's conditioned upon a thing that is set for December 1st. And when the charter school asks my staff, hey, I was renewed on October 1st, why are you not processing my renewal on the CDE website? I'm going to respond to them. Your authorizer has informed us that they're waiting on your signature. So we can have a back and forth about those kind of specific circumstances. Thanks, Mifla. Anyone have an example of a board certification? It should be very short. It should be resolutions. Thanks, Michelle. That's an even right on the day. They can be 1 to 2 page resolutions. So developing that into your practice. I imagine in the breakout room, there will be folks who can share one or have seen one. But the kinds of letters I've seen is very simple. On this date, the governing board renewed the charter school, put the name with the following term dates. You can kind of mirror what's in the charter renewal form. If you want to be fancy, you can say by a vote of 5-0. And then what we're looking for is something official, not an email. We're looking for a hard copy letter on a PDF with a letterhead and a signature. That's our supporting document. But Michelle's right. If you do a board resolution and it gets signed that day or the day after, you won't need a board action letter and you don't have to wait for minutes. And a lot of times charters need or want these because they have to tell their lender or other entities that they work with that they've been renewed, and that helps them as well. So it's not just for CDE. Oh, could I go to the next slide? So this is the actual CDE website where you're going to select notification of renewals. That's with the red arrow. And then the next slide, if you click that, it'll take you to this form. It's a 2-page form. You fill it out. And so if some of you are taking notes, you can see that section 4 in particular was shortened. And the Section 5 certification, this current version of the form will be revised in the next week or two, so it will specify that it can be a designee signing on behalf of the authorizer. We don't want you to be held up in trying to get your superintendent's signature. And then I think that's it, but just in case, next slide. Renewals. Oh, written notice. Yes, minutes include. So if you replace the minutes, it can be a resolution or board action letter. You want to have the specific dates. And the updated petition, everyone should have that in order to enact the renewal. Is there a slide 4? I don't think so. Oh, we were very detailed. Oh, if this is the one area, we will kick it back to you. Like the majority of you are middle or DAS, and it's a 5-year, it's very typical. But the few number of low performing, if you send us a 5-year renewal for a charter school identified low performing, we will reject it. We will give it back to you and say you were not authorized to give this charter school a 5-year. And so we will note that and send it back to you. And if you do a low performing, but you don't have that written plan adopted by the charter school as required by statute, we will ask you in a follow-up. So those are all the things that would hold up a processing of renewal. And if a charter said, what's taking so long, we would say, we don't see evidence that a written plan was adopted by the governing board. Low as of what date? Indra, you're always asking me the footnote question. So certainly as of the date that you've received the petition, I think we can all agree on that. And then the hard question is, what if it gets identified low performing while you're processing the petition? So I think there's a reasonability component here. If it's the day after they turn it in and you've still got 90 days to go, I think you're well within your review. If it happens the day of your board action, I don't think that's fair in that you didn't have time to analyze it with that information. However, as I mentioned, you do have the dashboard data that's been available since November. And so here at CDE, we did consider the dashboard data that came out for the charter that we'll be recommending for renewal on March 5th. So it happens to be a DAS, so there's not a performance category in play. So someone was saying something.
So I was just going to say, so you're using the date that CDE came out with the list, as opposed to the date that the data dropped.
Oh no, I think as an authorizer, if you get it March 30th, if you get a petition March 30th and CDE drops the performance categories on March 31st, I think you're well within the ability to analyze that with the performance category. So, however, if you get it the day before you issue board action and you publish your 15-day recommendation, I don't think you have that information. You don't have the category with you.
I guess my question is, and it's probably not for me, but I know I've gotten this question from other districts who don't feel comfortable always analyzing the data themselves. And so theoretically, they get a petition that is, that has previously been identified middle tier. The data drops that could have allowed them to identify it as low tier, but they're still considering it middle tier because they're not willing to make that analysis. They go through the process, they renew it as middle tier prior to March 31st, but after the data had already dropped, will the CDE consider that low because the data had dropped, or will they consider it and say, no, we at CDE hadn't made the analysis yet, so we're gonna let you do it at middle?
Yeah, I think that's fair, Andrea. A lot of authorizer shops don't have that capacity, and it is a high stakes thing. And so that's why I think it's important for your board resolution or your board action date to identify when the petition was received. So we'll honor the date that you received it as kind of a Polaroid snapshot in time. But if the performance category comes out the next day, I don't want to say this as a statutory rule, because there are petitions that might be going forward in the next week or two, right? And so our staff, when they get a renewal packet, they are looking at what did the authorizer have available to them when they received the petition and they took board action and the performance category date. Now, we've only done this. This is only our second year with performance categories. So there are going to be hypotheticals that I'm not going to envision and circumstances that might be very unique to a specific situation. But I think that's fair, Indra. What you get on November, not every authorizer has the capacity to crunch that and definitively decide that that's a low performing. If the school has a middle performing at the time of being received in November, and you're processing it before CDE releases the next category, that's the information we're processing the renewal at. Another reason not to wait too long. Get it to us while it's fresh so we can process it. I did see some questions, and I'm scrolling on not my computer, so bear with me. Is there an official template of low? Oh, John, I get asked that a lot. I have not seen one. I think this is similar to DAS criteria in that over time, hopefully we can develop a library, or CASI can develop a library of not so much templates, but samples. And so as that might be a breakout question where if someone has seen them, another way to find that out is you can sort our Excel spreadsheet and identify which schools have been low performing and look up their authorizers and see online, because most board docs are online, what exhibit the charter submitted. At the end of the day, I think as an authorizer, you want a low performing plan that you can take to your leadership and feel that this is a worthwhile low performing plan, in that it's very unique to what areas were low performing for that charter school. Hopefully we're not going to see copy and paste type things, but unfortunately no formal template at this time. Same as with DAS. Please elaborate on how to address a DAS school in process. So you cannot be DAS your first year. You have to show enrollment to be eligible for DAS. So if you're in the middle of a DAS, I think practically you're probably in the early years of your charter, so you're not yet up for renewal. But if you were applying for DAS and becoming eligible for DAS, I guess right at renewal time, I think that's something that you'll have to look at, because you'll need data to say you met the alternative metrics of that DAS eligibility, right? So I'm identified DAS, renew me. Well, wait a minute, we still have to have a statutory consultation where we discuss the criteria, and you have to demonstrate you've met that criteria. So Felicia, I hope that answers your question. The form says the authorizer determines the charter tier. Aren't we bound by CDE's tiered? CDE will use the CDE's list in determining what you are authorized to renew for. And in terms of authorizers, the data is out there. And so people have pointed out it's the data that controls. Hopefully the data always matches CDE's identification. And when it doesn't, I hope you're getting in touch with me because there's a discrepancy. There's no plan template. Are there particular required components? John, that's all we've got. There's no implementing regulations further beyond that. I think the way I would approach it is making sure that, remember, these are what people say are sort of defaulted to, you shall deny unless. And so I think the components that I would be looking at as an authorizer is what rationale do I have to recommend to my board that the unless should be overcome? So I hope it's not generic, but actually very specific to the charter school. But there's no template. I have no secret information about the low performing plan. And CDE cannot overwrite it. So we can't say, gosh, I wish the low performing plan was longer, or it is something that is locally determined. We are looking from a process point of view that it was approved by the charter governing board, that it was part of the official process. But similar to an LCAP, although there is a template for that, so not the best example, we don't go underneath and question your determination if that plan was valid or sufficient. Thank you, Suzanne, for that piece. No question there. Okay.
Yeah, one more slide.
Thank you. You knew what I was going to ask. If the status is low performing, yeah, so this is that process piece. So this has happened where an authorizer says they're renewed and they're low performing, goodbye. And no, we cannot process that until we see that supporting documentation. We will follow up with you. And if you have not done it, then you may need to go back and have a follow-up action to do that. So it's easier to do it at the outset. Am I good? Was that my last one? And then if you think of a question or you didn't hear an answer, you can always email us at charters@. That gets funneled to me if there's a renewal question, or I funnel it to our friends at the dashboard office if we need that. And then if you don't want to remember charters@, I'll put my email in the chat. But if you ask, oh, there it is, charters@. So look for the renewal form starting to say designee, but if you turned one in and it had a designee, that's fine too. Thank you for letting me talk on renewals.
All
right, next slide. So we're going to turn the time over to our friend Indra from LACO to talk about closure procedures.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Yes, again, my name is Indra Ciccarelli. I'm the director of the Charter Schools Office for Los Angeles County Office of Education, or LACO. LACO currently authorizes 21 schools, but about a year and a half ago, we had 27 schools. So while LACO has been authorizing for decades and usually experiences a closure every year or two, we've seen 6 closures just in the last year and a half. I've also helped several districts in our county with recent closures as well. So sort of become an unintended expert on this. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about closure. I only have about 5 to 7 minutes, so we obviously don't have time today for an in-depth training. I'm going to try and highlight some key areas and important things to keep in mind. LACO does have a comprehensive checklist that is in the participant folder, so you may want to open that up as I'm going through this. And I'm always happy to set up time individually if people have questions. Next slide. So to begin with, you'll see some of the suggested timelines or deadlines on our checklist. I do want to say that many of these deadlines are fluid, and they may change drastically depending on circumstances. You will often see these deadlines in reference to a quote-unquote closure action. That closure action is the point at which the school or authorizer decided to close the school. So the deadlines in our closure checklist will change depending on how that closure action interacts with the last day of instruction, the last day of operation, and the potential dissolution of the nonprofit. For example, obviously, deadlines for a school that decides in September to close at the end of the school year will look very different than a school being forced to in May to suddenly close in a week. These deadlines will often become much longer or spaced out for a school that is planning responsibly and well in advance of the last day of instruction. Some of the responsible parties may change as well, especially in extreme cases where unfortunately the authorizer ends up having to take on more tasks. For a responsible school, though, there will be a date of closure action. They'll give a clear date for the last day of instruction and a clear indication of who is the contact person and responsible entity for completing the closure procedures. Once those closure actions are mostly complete and that designated person is no longer employed by the school, they will also indicate the new contact for the final audit and possible dissolution of the nonprofit, which is usually a board member. The board should not dissolve until that final audit has been completed and approved. Next slide. So these are the contacts that are probably some of the most important information to get right at the beginning, as soon as that you know that school is closing. As the authorizer, you're trying to ensure clear and transparent communication with the community, continued education for students, appropriate fiscal closeout, and the maintenance of records. Next slide. So what you'll see on our checklist, many notifications speaking to that clear and transparent communication. You'll see many of those notifications, including those to parents, staff, contractors, as well as those to agencies such as the state, their SELPA, local districts. Again, a responsible school will do these, but they may end up falling to the authorizer in extreme cases. With regards to student records, the authorizer most likely will be collecting and maintaining these records, but it may not always be necessary in the case of a larger CMO who may elect to maintain the records themselves. What is necessary is that you as the authorizer know where those records went, who is now responsible for maintenance, and that the community clearly knows how to access those records should they need them. In our experience, even larger CMOs have usually elected to have the authorizer collect and maintain these records. Here at LACO, our records go to our warehouse, and student records department maintains them and responds to any request for records such as transcripts. My office does keep a list of what schools have closed and what records should be available so that if people call, we can sort of direct them to the right place. We also have a separate document that we provide to our schools that clearly outlines how our warehouse wants those records purged and organized prior to picking them up from the school. And you know, our warehouse is pretty specific. We have to get LACO boxes, and they have to be all filed specifically in LACO boxes in a specific way. So my office is usually working closely with the school to make sure that those records are organized correctly and ready for pickup by our warehouse. For staff records, it's actually my office that maintains these and directly responds to requests for employment verification. Similarly, these records should be purged of certain things such as discipline records. And a best practice is for the school to actually generate a cover letter for each staff file that clearly outlines that person's position and their dates of employment. Makes it easier because then I can just make a copy of that verification of that letter and send it when I need an employment verification. So finally, you'll notice I skipped over fiscal. Really is that's where most people have questions. The school should have a clear indication of another educational nonprofit where any leftover assets will be transferred. I will note that a secondary nonprofit is suggested as well in case the first designated entity closes. We've actually now included language within our MOU that indicates that LACO becomes a designated entity in cases where the designated entity or entities no longer exists. This becomes particularly relevant when late money comes in, such as mom money, which might be several years in coming. And so what we'll see is sometimes the money will come for the school is now closed. The entity they designated has now also closed. And so we have nowhere, we don't know where to send the money. The school does need to do both an end of year audit and a closeout audit, although these can be combined depending on when they are closing. Keep in mind, the authorizer may be actually liable for that final audit, right? The county is liable for those audits if they are not done. They also become liable for any unpaid CalSTRS and unemployment insurance if these aren't paid by the school. Also, while not technically liable for other debts, LACO has paid staff in extreme cases. As an authorizer, it's critical to keep track of your school's financial status well in advance of any potential closure. And upon closure action, the school is supposed to indicate how closure procedures will be paid. But obviously, this can be difficult in extreme cases where the school has no money. So that was sort of a very quick overview. You have my checklist. I'm going to kind of leave it there for now. Like I said, I'm happy to schedule individual time for more in-depth or pointed discussions. But are there any larger or general questions?
Andrew, would you mind sharing your cover letter that you put on the personnel files?
I can share what we asked them to put in that. We don't have like a template cover letter. We just asked them to include a cover letter that gives the person's name, dates of employment, their specific position, and whether they were full-time or not.
Hey, Indra, this is Susan from CDE. We have been developing a process at CDE with the closure notices. So if you recently told CDE that your charter school closed, that responsive to some federal feedback that we received, to inquire about closure activities that the authorizer is doing. So Indra walked through all of the things that the charter is supposed to do in a good, perfect world. And so some of the things that we're inquiring about, so you have them in your thought process, is how is the authorizing district and county or county ensuring families and students find a high quality public program following the closure. Obviously, this is most in need for a mid-year unplanned closure, and it's going to be different than a planned end of year closure, but you will see CDE inquiring about the authorizer either offering enrollment school of choice deadline extensions, town hall meetings, recruitment fairs or information sessions, or even emails to the families of the charter schools saying, here are your local options. So that's something that a lot of authorizers are doing. Some authorizers, it's not part of their practice. And so in inquiring, we're hoping it develops as a more expanded process. Hopefully not because charters are closing, but just because we're getting better at authorizing. So wanted to mention that and appreciate, Indra, you sharing this not fun, but always important information. It's like selling you a casket. It's just nobody wants to think about it, but it's really important to plan ahead.
Absolutely. And, I think to your point, Susan, like, your oversight and monitoring practices are a big part of this, right? Like if there's suddenly an extreme case or a school is closing, what information have you been collecting regularly that you already have access to for this school? Sometimes I tell smaller authorizers, like there's stuff that you can collect that you may not, have the capacity to review on a regular basis, but at least you have that information so that if something happens, you have something to reference later on. So to Susan's point in terms of the students, twice a year we're collecting student and staff rosters from our schools. And so when we have a school, if there's an extreme case where a school closes, we can go back to that and actually have a list of student names and addresses that we can use to either contact the parents, that we can use to start doing searches on CalPads to see if those kids show up somewhere else, and really try to reach out to the parents and identify where those kids went. And that is something that our board has always taken very seriously. We had a school a year or so ago that closed somewhat abruptly. They had about 800 kids. And we worked with the district to reach out to all of those parents and to try to have some sort of verification either through a direct parent contact or through CalPads to identify where all of those kids went. And I'll say I was pretty happy that out of the 800 kids, I'd say we ended up with somewhere between half a dozen to a dozen kids maybe that we had no contact or no information on. So I felt like we did pretty good on being able to verify that those kids had all gone somewhere else.
Thank you, Indra. Next slide, please.
I do see there's a
Okay.
question. Personnel and student records and the ability of different tech systems to talk to one another. Yeah, I mean, it's tough because each school has their own system, and you can ask them to print you a report and give you that information, but it's not like we have direct access to those systems.
Hey, Indra, I just want to, this forum, CASI, is not a forum to ask about liability. We cannot give legal advice as part of the CDE CASI discussion groups. So before Indra becomes very helpful and offers all his insight and might decide to have an offline one-on-one conversation practitioner to practitioner, which is fine. But as to the CDE forum, we cannot use this to give professional opinions or legal advice about liability.
Yeah, and I would always say talk to your lawyers. And the specific ones that I talked about in terms of the audit, like that's in ed code. That's why you're liable. It's because it's listed literally that the county has to do end of year audits if they're not done. So those ones that I gave were specific to ed code.
Okay, I don't see, one last question, I think, Andrew. Oh, no, I think you addressed that one. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our last, hot topic on fiscal oversight. Cynthia?
So today's fiscal hot topic is a reminder of the upcoming deadline of the second interim report. Education Code 47604.33A4 states that on or before March 15, a second interim financial report reflecting changes through January 31st is due to the chartering authority and the County Office of Education, or just the County Office of Education if they happen to be the authorizer. So that's just a quick reminder for today's fiscal hot topic.
Great, thank you, Cynthia. All right, so moving on, we're now going to move into our breakout rooms where folks will have an opportunity to ask further follow-up questions about anything that was discussed earlier, or if you have situations that you want to talk through with colleagues, you can ask or talk about those situations. We will have 4 breakout rooms for authorizers and 1 for non-authorizer partners. And the non-authorizer partners will be in room 5. I think that's right, room 5. If you are listed, oh, we don't have a list. The facilitators for room 1 is Michelle. So Michelle, please make sure you grab the link for recording notes. Room 2 is Mifala, Cynthia, Danielle, and Megan. Room 3, Dave, Sandy, and Tierney. Room 4, Matt and Allison. And then Tom, Craig, and Soledad will be in room 5 with the non-authorizers. All right, I think we're ready to jump over. It appears that everyone who's coming back is back. So let's do like 30-second report outs from the breakout rooms. Michelle, why don't you go first?
Sure. So we actually only had enough time to talk about 2 different questions. But the first one was the interesting one. Was a board member was asking, we've got a school closing. How much information should the board be kept apprised of? And my answer was, it kind of depends on when that closure is taking effect. So, but keep your boards informed. They need to know. There you go.
So in room 2, I think the main topic that we talked about is which list to use if a school submits near or before, but close to the drop of the new list. And so maybe that's something that CASI can circle back to again, or put some more clarification into the resource page for this month. Room 3.
Okay, well, we kind of had a little shuffle with our facilitators, so
Dave wasn't here. I'm
quite
so
as
sorry.
prepared as probably the other rooms, but we only had a little bit of time. So there was just some follow-up questions on renewal process and when how the notification comes back regarding when the renewal has been processed by CDE. And I clarified that we do send out a confirmation email once the locator has been updated. So for charter authorizers, you should get a confirmation email from CDE that says the renewal has been processed and the locator has been updated. And then you can also look at the locator and see that the expiration date has been updated. And then there was also another question about if the renewal has been denied, is there any form or process that a charter authorizer has to submit to the CDE regarding that? And there isn't anything, because usually if it's been denied at the district, of course, it goes to the county most likely on appeal. And if it doesn't do that, then it's denied. So the school has to close. So there's then the closure process they have to go through. So that's, I think, Soledad, was that all of everything that was talked about?
Yes.
Thank you, Sandy and Soledad. Room 4, Matt.
Yeah, we first had a brief discussion about closures and not taking, your eye off special education component when you're doing a school closure. Reminder that, the responsibility for FAPE does fall for the authorizer, so you want to make sure that you've got good communication with whichever closing school is going on with our special education program. We also had just a brief time to talk about very small schools that may not have enough students in particular subgroups to get dashboard measures for them and what role that plays in their performance level determination, which was a good sort of reminder that AMARD will be at Charter Chats next month for a conversation on performance levels. So stay tuned.
Thanks, Matt. Tom?
So in our group, we did, just in the interest of time, a couple of brief things. We did have some discussion of some of the uncertainty that has been out there about what to do with sort of a late addition of another year's data when you're already in the process, and it kind of cuts both ways. Sometimes the school would, if it's better in the most recent year, they want it considered, but if it's worse, maybe not. And so it's tricky from both a process standpoint, crunching the data effectively, but also the politics are tricky. And then in terms of new discussion, some comparing of notes about, are you really going to rely on the promised COLA at this point for next year, and some thought that, well, maybe some caution. Let's see what happens with the May revise. Just we're in a time of uncertainty right now.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Tom?
Oh, this is me. Okay, well, we've already seen, if you've been following the chat, we've already been doing our traditional begging for feedback. This is, again, just to recap the earlier slide, this is a double request because we have feedback for today and for our regional meetings or our quarterly meetings, but also we have the authorizer survey, so please take a look at both of those. Give us your feedback.
See you again on the next slide.
Okay, upcoming events. So we'll be back with Charter Chat again on the 26th. The quarterly training that's coming up is, we've been doing this one every year, the Road to Renewal. Yes, we will cover the basics, but for those of you who have been to it every year and thinking, okay, I've heard that one, every year that we're in this, we learn some things. We get some tricky scenarios that come up and may be contested, maybe even litigated. So we will be doing our usual overview, but trying to not sharing legal advice, but some of the things that have been out there. And then we will have some good time for breakouts where people can just kind of share tricky situations, in confidence, and that may be a worthwhile discussion for those who are going down this path.
Thanks for the Tom.
Next slide. Next one, again, we can do the on-site trainings. The calendar is getting a little tricky for that, but if you do have a group that would like to have someone bring the show on the road to an authorizer or group of authorizers near you, do let us know. And we're going to be in the next round of CASI in the new fiscal year, so even if it's not. I don't envision anything between now and the end of the year. Just put in the interest, because CASI will continue and we'll be able to provide this support for you if you think you'd like something more localized.
Next slide.
Is this me as well? We try to take note of other things going on out there. There's a lot of conferences coming up, CASBO and everybody, but in terms of the specific charters one, CCSA is going to be coming up very soon. So some of us will see you there.
And finally, if you have questions that weren't answered today or you need more information, feel free to contact us with the information on the next slide. And thanks everybody for joining us.